Well, Canada, whether you like it or not, or you're ready or not, here it is. Mark Carney and the Liberals have a majority in the House of Commons after a combination of floor crossings and a clean sweep in the by-elections on April 13th. To talk more about it, as always, thrilled to be joined by Paul McCucci. Paul, how are you?
Good, Jim. How you doing?
Good. It seemed like a fait accompli heading into the by-elections. At worst, it would have been 2 of the 3. They got all 3. Yep. They have 174 seats, and they're going to be in power with really no worries about any kind of election for the next 2.5 years.
Yeah. And do you mind if we get in? Sorry to bug you with stats,
No.
but I'm a stats guy.
Yeah.
I broke it down and I looked at it after, and I thought to myself, my goodness, is the country become that disengaged with this topic? And it really kind of got me. And I know by-elections tend not to be the most well-attended, the best turnout.
Yes.
But quite frankly, these were 3 by-elections that created the final majority.
Absolutely.
And, it's interesting because we had floor crossings. We had the new LibCon caucus that's now within the...
In the big tent?
In the big tent,
Everyone's
right?
welcome in the tent?
The new LibCon caucus
Yes.
within the big tent, right?
Yeah.
So, and, that occurred, and
Yeah.
and we thought, okay, and then they came out over the weekend and said, we don't want the majority to be taken through floor crossers. We really want it to be votes in these by-elections, which was well positioned. I think that's all positioning, and, good for them. They did a good PR job in getting us to believe that. So we bought into it. But, these are 3 by-elections that were really deciding the direction of our country, like you said, up until 2029.
Without question.
So here we go, right? This was very interesting. And the first thing that jumped out to me is that they won each of these by-election ridings with 20,000 votes.
But was not even close. Even in Terrebonne, Quebec, it wasn't even close.
But they won it with 20,000, right?
Yeah.
So the number of eligible voters. So if we go to Rosedale, was 93,000. So they got 21% of 93,000.
Yeah.
Right? Now, let's back up and look at what the Conservatives and the NDP got. The NDP got 5,859 votes, and the Conservatives got 3,843,000 votes. Now, you're familiar with where this is at in Toronto, right?
Time,
Rosedale,
yeah.
right?
For people not aware, the Rosedale area of Toronto is some of the wealthiest homes in the country. It's akin to Westmount of Montreal or the exclusive North Vancouver area. So it's one of the elite, big money, old money neighborhoods in the city.
Right. Which, quite frankly, there's a lot of Conservatives and Liberals live within this riding.
Big time.
For the Conservatives to go out and not to be able to identify over 10,000 voters to vote Conservative in this riding is unbelievable. And for the NDP to beat them in this riding is even more incredible.
I can't say I'm surprised, Paul.
I'm not surprised. I know Chrystia Freeland, she had this riding. She did a good job at it. She really entrenched it as a Liberal. But you know what? You think that through modern technology and databases, you would have been able to figure out the number of Conservatives that live within this area and go canvass them. And here's the interesting thing. When you watch this by-election, Jim, and we were watching it very closely,
right?
The Liberals do a really good job of going door to door and getting their vote out. So they take the young Conservatives, and what they do is they have them go door knock. And they watch. When you make a vote, there's vote sheets that are at the election centers. And so what they do is they look and see who hasn't voted in their database, and then they go knocking on the door and saying, hey, you haven't voted yet. We only have so many hours to vote. The Conservatives don't do that for the most part. They're not very aggressive. They don't have a ground team. The Liberals always have a ground team.
I will say this, don't interrupt, but in my riding, Sandra Kubena, Newmarket Aurora, she knocked on literally every door, every house in her riding.
Yeah.
And that's why she won. But think about this. On all the Liberal signs in this by-election, there was the candidate and there was Mark Carney.
Yeah.
Because he's got a 68% approval rating. And people believe he is needed to steer us through the next few years. These candidates in these by-elections for the Conservatives were on their own. You didn't see Pierre Poilievre's face beside the candidate's face. because right now he's an anchor around their neck.
He is. Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but I just let me get through the stats. So here we are, Rosedale didn't figure out a way.
No.
Right? Got beat by the NDP, so really didn't try. Let's be serious. And, I heard yesterday I was downtown. I had a meeting, Yonge Street and Front. I finished my meeting and I run into a buddy of mine who's with one of the political parties. And we're talking, and he says to me, a lot of rumors on the Conservative side that they actually told their people just not to compete here, to stay home. That
it felt like it.
And I said, oh, come on, you're kidding me, right? And he said, no, that a lot of people on the Conservative side are saying in this riding they were asked not to compete.
Take a step back.
Oh, but then what are you doing? Why? If you're not going to compete and you don't think you have a shot in every riding, then that's the wrong approach. That is definitely the wrong approach. And whether you like it or not, someone needs to sit down and have a conversation with them and say, okay, shake your head. You need to get back in the game in every riding. In today's world with technology and databases and the ability to database mine and the ability to meet people and go talk to people and create caucuses and factions to vote, there's no excuse that you should believe that you're going to lose in every riding.
No, Paul, I'm not disagreeing with you because everything you say is factually correct in all economic and math levels.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it from a strategic level. Poilievre has inner circle the Conservatives. They know that if it's a minority government and there's election, they would get absolutely crushed. Like right now, even with the majority, the Liberals have 174.
Yep.
The Conservatives still have 140 seats. That's not chump change.
It isn't.
But in an election right now, in this spring, they may have 50. There are some predictions they would lose over 40 seats that they have right now in an election to the Liberals. It would turn. And it would be a huge difference. So they can't afford an election right now on many levels because they've got problems within the party to work out over these next few years.
Right. No, I'm with you. And we're going to talk about that in a minute because I think there's some reasons. There's some reasons that the Liberals created that. And there's also some luck. So I want to talk about that too.
Absolutely.
I think, sometimes hard work and luck create your fate.
Right.
And quite frankly, in this case, Scarborough Southwest. So this is a really interesting one. Another 20,114, right? Dolly won that. She did a good job. She went to her caucus, her country people. She did a very good job, and she got the vote out.
John Tory, historically a Tory conservative, campaigned for her.
Yeah, well, I'm with you, but the Conservatives got 5,300 people. The NDP got 1,700 people.
Which I actually, in Scarborough Southwest, considering the riding it's in, I thought the NDP would get more.
Yeah, well,
I'm surprised by that.
It is. But again, here we are, and this is very interesting. And this is just kind of politics 101, right? So if you're running against a candidate that has a rich history with another country and has a large immigrant group running against you, you either find someone in that group who can try to offset that political voting power
and connect
of
with
that
people.
faction connect with those people and get them out to vote, right? Americans do it, Jim. Having lived in America, they do it so well. I probably ran 10 bills in my life in the U.S., and I had to go to different caucuses within, the Italian caucus, the African American caucus. I had to go, and I had to get support from each of those caucuses to actually win votes to get bills passed.
Right.
That's just the reality of what you have to do. So you have to go and you have to find out what they need, what they want, what their political pressing point is, and how you're going to address it, overcome it, and get their support. That's politics. And if you're not doing that politics, and if you're letting your opponent play that politics and not playing that politics, you're not being realistic at this point. So you're not in the game and you're not being smart. So in this case, quite frankly, if you couldn't find another group in Scarborough Southwest to counter the vote, Dolly's vote, then you're not competing. And in this case,
we're competing again.
In this case, but here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing of this, right? She ended up with 23% of the eligible voters.
Right.
So she won it again. In the first one we talked about in Rosedale, They win it with 21%, really an unknown candidate, doctor, doctor.
But a liberal.
But no one really knew her. And quite frankly,
They don't care. She's a liberal.
as you said, you could run a watermelon there and they would have won.
As long as it's liberal,
Yeah, exactly.
that cup would win.
That cup, my shirt would win.
Yeah, you should.
No, and so here you are. So another 20,000. You're only getting 23% of the vote. But here, another 6%. Another 6% for the Conservatives. And, in the Rosedale riding, they only got 4% of the eligible voters. So now you're still under 10%. Yeah. So are you, at some point you got to say to yourself, hey, if I can't organically get 10% of the vote based on my brand, based on my database, based on my mark, then I got a challenge, right? Now, Terrebonne, right? Interesting scenario. It was won by the Liberals. Again, another 22,000. In this case, they ended up getting more. So they ended up getting 24%, almost 25% of the eligible voters, which was 91,000.
That's still low, though. 25% of the eligible voters for, as you say, what could be a game-changing by-election in the country. People are so dissatisfied with politics and so checked out, they just don't care to vote.
Well, so look at now I'm going to go to the total. So all three by-elections got 106,000 people to vote.
Right.
Eligible voters, there were 271,000.
That's all you need to know.
So you got, 39% is what you got out. So you got a third.
Which is really low.
You got a third. Well, in such a critical by-election. So then this morning coming in, I went to, because, I'm interested. You're interested. I know you're interested because we talk about it all the time. I went to Mike and I said, I want to see if many people are even interested in this anymore. So do me a favor, go look at the TV ratings. Mike has a TV background.
Yeah.
So he went on and he came back to me and goes, it's about 100,000, all the mainstream TV channels that actually did shows on it.
Yeah.
I said, you're kidding me. So it was 100,000 people came out live to vote, and across the nation, 100,000 people watched.
Out of 41 million.
Out of 41 million.
Yeah.
A vote that actually switched the majority over to. So, you can take credit and say, I'm a rock star. They love me. I'm doing really great. But forget the party for a minute, right? This just says something about the politics and the time we're in.
Yeah.
People have disconnected from this, and they've disconnected. They're not watching it. They're not interested in it anymore. And I think a little bit of it is, and people are going to laugh when I say this, it's the taco syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. What happened was we've been going through this up and down yo-yo, and people have again disconnected because I said, you know what? I can't watch this anymore. You have this U.S. neighbor of ours. They're running all around the world. They're telling another nation to come out of their houses and revolt over in Iran. They're dropping bombs, telling them to give up because they've sunk their navy to the bottom of the sea. They bombed them.
Actually made an AI image of him as baby Jesus healing people and tried to say, no, I wasn't Jesus. I was a doctor.
Exactly. How many we're on plan 5 to take over Iran. We failed 5 times. I think we're now in the second ceasefire peacekeeping discussion. We said peacekeeping's on, then we said peacekeeping's off. Now
J.D. Vance wasn't even there a whole day and he left.
Today we're back talking again. When I was driving in this morning, Mike calls me. They're back talking. Well, Mike, you know what? I don't want to talk about it anymore. I said, This is silliness. I don't want to have any more discussions. I don't want to see anyone buy another stock because they think Iran is going to be settled. Right. I don't want to see any of this more. So I think what happened, and to Mark Carney's luck, not credit, I'm not saying that he did anything to do this. I think he's just caught a wave in the middle of this, quite frankly, of people disconnected. I think they're so sick of it at this point. They're sick of walking the floor. They're sick of by-elections. They don't want to hear about the tent and the libcons and this new faction. And what you got is a disconnected group of Canadians looking at a by-election. Now, the brilliance with which I think the Liberals did have in these 3 by-elections is they went quiet.
Well, they just
disappeared.
The Monday after their big convention.
But I don't even think the convention, honestly, Mike and Brady went to the convention. Yeah. And quite frankly, I think once Marilyn Gladue, she did the Gladue slide across from blue to red.
Yeah. I hate you. I love you. Let's go.
You. Exactly. So once she did the shuffle and she made it over to the other side, I don't think it mattered. I think what happened was they decided that there's no point in talking about this anymore because they shut it down. I think they wanted it to be a big thing. I think they set it up to be this big convention and a lot of rah-rah.
Yeah. I
think as it started to unfold, they're like, oh, we got to shut this down. So I think they dialed down the temperature kind of and by disappearing, Pierre Poilievre had already pigeonholed himself, not thinking about any strategy whatsoever, went to the U.S., did Joe Rogan, became the kettlebell expert, and started running around. Didn't realize, quite frankly, that he couldn't come out and attack because he was trying to change his reputation of not being the pit bull.
And he's failing.
Well, I'm
going to give you 2 examples why he's failing.
It's backfiring on him. Yeah.
A week ago, he holds a press conference and he's answering questions for people. And a CBC reporter keeps going to the conservative media relations person holding the mic and asks a question. They refused to let her ask one question. Now, if he's supposed to be this Pierre Poilievre 2.0, does he not have the guts to answer one question from a CBC reporter? Then he goes on a podcast and says, Mark Carney's uneducated in economics. Now, I can criticize Mark Carney about a lot of things.
I saw that, yeah.
The man went to Harvard.
Yeah.
So why would he say, when he shoots himself in the foot, how can anyone take him seriously when he does things like that? He obviously hates the media, fine. But you still have to man up and answer the questions and criticize Carney all you want. To criticize him, thinking he's uneducated in economics, for God's sakes, he ran the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
That's just silly.
It is silly. And, without having a strategy, he went into that U.S. tour and, interesting strategy, but quite frankly, they didn't tie to the by-elections where the mistake was. They didn't tie the by-elections into the tour, right? And so the tour probably was best held after the by-elections. It was in the wrong order, quite frankly. You would have been better to be out on the campaign trail of the by-elections, being in the community, trying to show that you were actively trying to gain support for your party, win or lose, because that's what you do when you compete. Not going down and trying to change your image on U.S. podcasts. And quite frankly, it didn't come off great. I know that some of the podcasts were okay, but it didn't help him. And case in point, to your point, Jim, the numbers don't lie.
No.
The numbers don't lie. It only actually dropped him because if the strategy had worked, and I think, quite frankly, one of the issues that I think came up during that is his own head of PR quit.
Yeah,
I think
after 10 years, she tapped out.
Yeah, she realized this strategy isn't going to work, and quite frankly, we went in the wrong direction again.
At the end of the day, I think the majority of Canadians, we're seeing 68% approval rating, are like, you know what? I don't trust any political leader right now in this country to steer us through the next 2.5 years other than Mark Carney. Mark Carney is a guy we believe can deal with Trump and steer us to 2029, to the point that Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, spent 3 weeks before the by-election talking to reporters every chance he had, saying it's a good thing if Carney gets a majority so we can work together and battle Trump. They kept hammering it home, and then you saw the result.
I see the result. I'm going to add a condition on that.
Sure.
I don't disagree with anything you said. The condition being it is the result for 20% of the population.
But they knew
but all you have now in Canada is 20. So,
yeah,
you're talking really, so you're out of 40 million people, you may be talking, take out seniors over 70 or 80.
And
take
kids,
out kids,
yeah.
Right? So you're really looking at maybe you're addressing 30 million.
Max.
Right. So you're 6 million people.
Right.
So your audience has come down to, 6 million people out of all eligible Canadians. So that's who you're talking to. That is your sphere of influence, and that's who you're talking to. And that's sad because, quite frankly, you've disconnected whether you're red, blue, purple, whatever you are,
Yeah.
you've disconnected yourself. So much so, which is interesting, because we had Max Bernier.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting comments from Max.
We had him on the show, and I was interested to watch, and we asked him this question, and we said, "How do you think you're going to do in the by-elections?" Right. Well, I think we're going to I think we're going to get some votes. They got 575 votes in his home province.
Yes.
Right. They got 265 in Scarborough Southwest and 205 in Rosedale.
So they're not a serious political party. When you only get it, I mean, that's nothing.
But, quite frankly, and, this is where I think they all need to sit down and sort of think through some strategy and positioning. In this day and age with databases, in this day and age with technology, in order to only get 200 people is almost impossible. Like literally my own personal Rolodex, I could have gone into Rosedale and got 1,000 people.
Those votes smack of it's a protest vote. I hate the Bloc Québécois. I hate the Liberals, hate the Conservatives. I'm going to vote for them. And that's my protest vote.
But protests, I get it. But even if you're just looking for the protest vote, there has to be a way for these even smaller parties, whether it be NDP, PPC, there's got to be a way for them to grow just through technology and influence and conversation. But they're not having any. They're not putting the effort in. Whether it's newsletters, newspapers, whether it's drops, whatever they're doing in their communities. They go into these elections. They don't have anything on ground. They don't have any plans. It's not well executed, Jim. They're terrible at it, quite frankly. Yes. And, they've got to acknowledge they're terrible at it. If you're terrible at something, you either got to fix it. And quite frankly, we shouldn't make allowances for this.
But in the current economic climate that we're in, and as much as we hate to bring it up, Trump is having a huge fear that hangs over us like a dark cloud. I don't think the average Canadian looks at Avi Lewis or Max Bernier as someone they think can deal with Trump. So the
20%, Jim. So not the average. No, I don't want to say average anymore. I want to call it like it is.
Fine. But the 20%,
only 20% of Canadians pay any attention to any of the parties. So yeah, agreed. Like you can do the hero's walk on this all day long.
But the rest of Canadians
of Canada.
I'm saying the rest of Canadians
you're representing right now
don't care about politics. They feel no one listens to them.
Exactly.
Their voice isn't heard. They go to the grocery store, and after all this talk, I still can barely feed myself. They're having trouble putting gas in the tank. They don't know whether their kid's going to be able to get a house on their own. They are very worried, and they don't feel like anyone is answering their questions.
Yeah, which is great. So you just gave me my argument that I was going to make, which you always do, right? So therefore, if I'm a political opposition to the party, to the Liberals right now, if I'm the official opposition, I feel so strong and emboldened to fight because, quite frankly, I know that right now all of us only have 20% of eligible voters in Canada. So therefore, the rationale to quit in any specific riding is bizarre. It's bizarre. It doesn't prove, the math doesn't prove it out. I know Pierre Poilievre loves the math, right? Because he's always talking about, to your point, he accused Carney of not being good at economics. Okay, Pierre, here's some math that supports voting, right?
Okay.
Yeah. If only 20% of the people are coming out to actually vote for your major opposition, that leaves 80% of the vote available for you. And if you don't see that, quite frankly, and you didn't see that these ridings were a possibility, then you should think about that. You should start thinking about what are the possibilities of me doing this better to get another 10% this year, to get another 10% next year, to get myself ready for voting.
Well, and I'll play the devil's advocate, Paul.
Yeah.
So instead of thinking, well, if it's a minority government, there's an election, we got 60 days to do something.
Right.
Now he has 2.5 years to do exactly what you're talking about, to reach all those disaffected and dissatisfied and disenfranchised Canadians who feel no one's talking to them. They feel like no one listens to them. They don't have a hope. Mm-hmm. So now you can go coast to coast to coast for our 3 oceans and go all over this country for 2.5 years while Carney's busy running the country.
And create your database.
Right.
Right. But he won't.
Wait, but
He won't.
Then they have to get a new leader.
And the PPC won't, and the NDP won't, Jim. There's no interest for these people. What we've created this lethargic, unproductive political system that they won't go do it. And that is sad.
Then change it. So pick, let's get Susie Slobberknocker from Scarborough, and we think she's going to be the next leader. We're putting you in. Sorry, Pierre, you're out, and we're going to be going. By God, we'll knock on every door in this country for the next 2.5 years, so everyone knows about Susie and votes for her the next election.
Well, you know what? So then it came, getting ready for the show, I'm thinking about this conversation because I know, you would have definite opinions on it. So then I actually sat down and I said, okay, what countries have mandatory voting?
Australia.
Yeah. Mexico.
Yep.
Right. Brazil. But there's a bunch of them.
I didn't know that. Brazil.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Let's go to mandatory. So
I'm all for it.
I know. Well, we always say we're all for it. I'm with you, but
let's give us an incentive, though.
Yeah.
If you vote, you get like some tax break.
A day off.
A day off.
A day off.
A paid day off.
We just did a show on the lack of productivity in Canada. It was a minimum wage show, which everyone should watch because we're not against minimum wage. We're not against breaks and lunches and everything. We're about Canadians making more money and getting parity with wages with the United States, which has grown to over almost 20,000 more than Canadians make on average.
And we got to change that as a country.
Well, in the paper this morning, I'm reading, the Toronto Sun had a great article, if anyone wants to read it, about the removal of the middle class from Canada.
I've been reading it everywhere
food insecurity. Now. Well, yeah, sure. We just did a show about it in Winnipeg, Mike.
Right.
So now we're starting this crazy conversation, but we don't want to talk about how to make ourselves more productive. In this case, from elections, let's go back to elections for a minute. Let's make mandatory voting. Let's make everyone get a day off.
Couldn't agree more.
Go vote. That'll take care of the issue. If our political parties don't want to campaign and they don't want to get out and vote and get the vote out, then we should actually make voting mandatory so then people get a day off. And when they go to the voting box, they might spend an hour or two, or maybe a day or two, or maybe for the interested 6 million that are currently the 20% people voting right now that were in this by-election, because that's where I think I know, we got more people out to vote in last election because of a renewed interest. We've lost that again.
But think about, they always say the lower the voter turnout, the better it is for the incumbent.
Oh, of course.
And Doug Ford's won 2 majorities the last 2 elections with barely any turnout in the province of Ontario.
Oh, yeah.
Horrible turnout.
Well, it's interesting. And one of our beloved politicians across Canada, Hazel McCallion, I used to, when she used to come around, I used to have a coffee and talk to her. She'd say, I win Mississauga with 85,000 votes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So 10% of the votes.
That's close to 1 million people in Mississauga.
Yeah. Well, it's less now. It's been a declining municipality for the last 5 years, but population wise. But she used to talk about it. She said, I'm the incumbent, and quite frankly, if I get above 60,000, I know I'm going to win.
I just feel so many Canadians, Paul, feel like they've been double crossed, lied to, promised things, didn't get them. They're seeing the Prime Minister spend $500,000 on catered food and Can Force One in 12 months.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
Okay, that's tough to reconcile with telling your kids we can't go there this weekend because we can't afford it. Well, that's a tough one,
right? And as you're watching all this, and it's hard to watch. You're watching all this U.S. political rhetoric. It's depressing, right? He's talking about the elimination of societies and stuff. It's very hard to watch because, and then you wake up in the morning, you're driving to work, you think, oh man, that's a tough drive because I'm worried for these people in Iran. I'm worried for this, this whole society of people. Now and then on top of it, you're struggling with all the affordability issues. You're disconnecting from a wide swath of people. And so therefore, to reconnect with them, we have to create formulas and policies to get them back into play. Mandatory voting is a good thing to think about now.
Yeah.
It really is. I know, there's going to be a lot of hubbub because, of course, if I'm in the Liberal shoes right now, as you're mentioning, in the incumbent, I don't want it, right? But
look, Paul, if by 2029 we have an election and somehow Pierre Poilievre is still the leader of the Conservatives, it doesn't matter if there's 90% voter turnout. The Liberals won't lose. because there's so many people in this country will only ever vote Liberal.
Yes.
And to convince the ones on the fence, you need a different leader. The message and the voice and the style of governing and running his party and dealing with reporters and dealing with people, it's not working. So they're destined to always be number two. Destined.
Yeah. Well, we did, as you know, we went out to the Conservative Convention. Yeah. We sat there. We understand sort of what they did to get him back in as the party leader or to get him to keep going. That's a conversation they have to have now, right?
They do.
They need to sit down and say, okay, is this worth? And then do I want to compete, or are we actually just going to cruise into the next one, lose again? And so that really becomes, but then it becomes, you're looking at it now. Is it a single party country now? So because you really got to look at these, you got to look at these results that are the results that predicted and were well predicted, not contested, had poor voter turnout for majority of the country to get majority of the country. You got to look at it and say, okay, have we got, and if we have, can we save a lot of money at this point? Can we save a lot of money? And the next thing, if we're not going to compete, then it does become a longer term strategy. So I think if the Liberal government is cemented now, then we should start doing some planning based on an 8-year and a 12-year cycle, which I think, quite frankly, would be better for the country. 4-year election cycles are,
I would be against that.
No,
I'm sorry. I can see where you're going, but I would be against that long because, unfortunately, the longer you're in power, the bigger risk. Already there's some stories about, different, they have the integrity commissioner about different things they're doing wrong and breaking rules. And the longer you're in power, the better chance there is of rule breaking and trying to skirt the system. And that's not good for Canadians. Andrew Coyne of the Globe and Mail wrote a fantastic column basically saying all these floor crossings to get a majority is wrong and not good for Canada. And there are so many people now, Paul, to go back to your point, are saying, why would I bother to vote? I'll vote for Nick, the producer, great guy. But then 2 weeks later, he crosses the floor. Why did I bother?
Right.
And how did they get the message across to Canadians that your vote still counts when the person you put the faith in and voted for went to the other party that you didn't believe in?
Right. All the more reasons to just validated, which is to retool we need to go back and retool the whole system, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's mandatory voting, whether it's floor crossings, these are all the things that need to be looked at and really analyzed, because if your disengagement is this high, then it really speaks to the fact that you need to look at it.
I mean, is it going to get better in the next few years? That's I don't see it improving unless there are systemic changes like we create. You'll get a guaranteed paid day off to vote. Maybe that'll change things. But right now, why would you? Why would it change?
Economic collapse is the only thing that will get people to re-engage in it in any form or substance is collapse. If our economic system collapses, which I hope doesn't happen, no one wants that to happen, but that is the only way people are going to come back into the fold, because out of necessity, they'll have to pay attention again. And even then, I think it's going to be hard, because you right now, with no middle, with the middle leaving,
the middle class is almost done in Canada.
You're really left with, if you think about it, the 20% people that are engaging. So if you look at Rosedale and you look at 20% of the people voted the Liberals in there, right? That's an upper class neighborhood, as we talked about. It's that 20% which makes up 60% of the wealth in Canada. That's just case in point of what's happening.
Yeah.
And so that's what's happening. Is it going to get better? I think we have to make strategic changes. And when I say, I'm going to go back to a minute because I want to make sure I'm clear on this. I'm saying the planning cycle has to be 8 to 12 years.
Not the election cycle.
I think you can keep your election cycle the same. So I'm not saying change the election cycle.
I'm saying, I misunderstood.
No, that's all right. And I'm glad you brought it up. But I really think, that is kind of what you're seeing in the United States right now, which is kind of the downfall of the U.S. And I think they're seeing it. You have Biden, who did have cognitive challenges. Now you have Trump, who
does have something wrong with him.
Yeah, but something's going on there. So, but you have polar left and polar right. No one's in the middle, right? So it's hard to do a long-term strategy when you have such polar opposite views, because you're yo-yoing a country. A country that big, you can't pull, it's like a slow ship, right? It's a slow turn. You have to, it's not a speedboat, right? You can't pivot and go the other direction. So quite frankly, you got to slowly turn it if you're going to turn it. And the problem is you get these 4-year elections, and the next thing you know, the party changes, off you go. And quite frankly, you're going in a total different direction. You're fighting legally and strategically and constitutionally, all for the 4 years. All you're trying to do right now, when you have polar governments, you're just trying to block to get to the other side, right?
But now that Carney has the majority, and the first thing he said the day after is, enough talking, we're going to get to work.
Great.
And you probably won't see him in the House of Commons arguing with politicians, because his idea is, now I get the majority, I'm the CEO, I'm rolling up my sleeves in my custom-built Seville Rose suit, and I'm going to start pounding away and hammering away and getting deals done. Yeah. He had the Prime Minister of Finland in yesterday. He was talking about a potential joining the EU. They skated around with the PWHL team in Ottawa. That's the one thing now that Carney doesn't have to dick around with arguing and debating and answering questions. He won't be answering them because he's going to run it like a company, a corporation, a hedge fund, and start getting to work. And this is going to take away a lot of the ammunition for Poilievre, the Conservatives, if he just starts pounding away and doing things like they were saying he didn't do anything. Well, now he's going to do things. And it'll be interesting the next 2, 3, 4 months what he starts doing and implementing.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people said that he would prorogue the government once he got. I never thought that was a legitimate. If he would have lost and not got majority.
Maybe, but he shot that down pretty quickly. I'm not sure where that came from. No. There's always lots of rumor mills going on Parliament Hill and with the Ottawa Press Corps, but I don't see it. He has a lot of effective politicians in his caucus, in his cabinet, who are effective debaters and are really good at, doing the back and forth in the House of Commons. They can do his dirty work for him.
Yep. No, I'm with you, Jim. And I talked to him. It's interesting. So I talked to Mike, getting ready for the show, and I'm sitting with him. And I said, you know what, Mike? I think now they have majority. I think you have to sit back now. And I say, we have to just, the by-elections are done. Disappointed with the turnout. I think we all are. I'm
not surprised at it, but yes, I agree.
I think they probably are too. They don't talk about it. No. And I know, it's interesting when you watch mainstream TV the night of the by-elections, they did a good job of pulling down the vote count.
Yeah.
I think they went to, 172, 173. Yeah. They showed the total seats, but they did a good job because I think even they realized, they weren't getting a lot of people watching them. The mainstream TV wasn't getting hundreds of thousands. They were getting 100,000-ish.
Youth unemployment is so sky high. These young voters are trying to attract. Right now, Paul, they're like, I just want to find a job. I just want to make some money. I just want to live. They're not even thinking about a by-election or politics right now.
Well, you know what? It's interesting, and we're doing a show on it, which everyone stay tuned for. I was just at a job fair, and we put together some stuff for a show, and I'm going to come back, and it's a very interesting look at people looking for work today.
Oh, wow!
And who's looking for work?
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
Okay,
thank you, Jim, and please subscribe.
Like, comment, and. Whether you like it or not, Carney's in charge until 2029, so we'll see what kind of work he does, and we'll see what happens to these other parties as well. Yeah, well, I think it gives them all time to retool, Jim, and I think, quite frankly, we got to support, initiatives. We're in a critical time. We are in a critical time, so whatever decisions are made now really will. Well, let's pull together. Tenfold. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Thank you.